Hello, NSTP leaders in training. My name is Kirsten Vinther. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a prevention specialist at Health Education and Campus Health and Wellbeing at Cal Poly. Today, I'll be going over with you what the Know Your Limits presentation will look like this year. Today, we will talk about support services and resources in relation to alcohol and other drug education and recovery at Cal Poly. We'll look at some statistics to know. We'll talk about the tools to help stay safe if someone chooses to legally consume alcohol. We'll look at some alternative activities, look at some of our challenges, and also specifically for you, I'll be asking you to consider your level of influence as leaders if purchasing, encouraging, or assuming alcohol or drug use in the incoming students. And lastly, I'll give you some tips and some tools for how to help a friend or a peer with a drug or alcohol-related problem. So we're going to dive right into what the WOW presentation will look like. For the content, we go into numerous different things. We look at breaking up social norms. We know how incredibly strong those can be. And we know that when the social norm, the expectation is to see everyone drinking or partying, that tends to be what we see. Confirmation bias means we are more likely to expect and to notice the things that confirm what we think versus the things that are disconfirming. And I'd ask you to think back on your transition to Cal Poly and what you expected and what you thought college life was going to look like. We know that 26% of Cal Poly students don't drink or haven't had a drink in the last 30 days. And we want incoming students to know that. We look at alcohol and drugs and college life. There are some very obvious effects of drug and alcohol use that we will talk about, but we will also talk about some of the more subtle effects. Things like effects on GPA, on health, on well-being and mental health, finances, and effects on time. We will then definitely teach them some of the tools for partying safe. While we don't assume that everyone will use, we recognize that many of our students will. So we want students to have the information they need to be safe. Some of these will be repetitive for you. And the reason we do that is because we want this information to be easily accessible, like the back of your hand. So whatever circumstance a student finds themselves in, these ways to stay safe are embedded. We do look a little bit at the legal and conduct-related ramifications. So students are aware of what the rules are, so they know if they're choosing to break them. Sadly, we talk pretty deeply about alcohol overdose. We will talk about Carson Starkey and his story, the ramifications his death had on his family and friends, and hopefully give tools to students to recognize what alcohol overdose looks like and recognize the medical amnesty laws that protect them. And then we go into resources on campus. There are so many resources, as you all well know, that students have access to within the health center. That includes health, counseling, and well-being services, most of which are free or at very, very low cost to students. And we want them to know exactly what it is to look for and who to ask for help. So breaking up social norms. These slides and the presentation are devoted to checking their expectations and the realities of college partying. We introduce them heavily to the Mustang Way and talk about pride, responsibility, and character. We encourage personal and social responsibility if they choose to drink. We confront some of those perceptions versus realities, and we also look at the realities of the caretaking behaviors that Cal Poly students do exhibit. We want to make sure that those are the social norms that we're encouraging to move forward. Alcohol, drugs, and college life, these are really devoted to looking at some of the ramifications of drug and alcohol use. We want them to be able to identify some policies. We look at cannabis and Juul use and state the fact that it is illegal to use either on campus property. We also start to look at some of the risk factors of partying and also the consequences of high-risk drinking that are more subtle. Things like academic problems, health problems. 45% of students who drank alcohol reported they did something they later regretted. We want the students to have this information when they're making their decisions. And we show them multiple different ways that they can get involved. We know that building community and having a connection to Cal Poly's campus is huge in helping these new students find their space and be healthier and happier on campus. When it comes to partying safe, as I said, I hope some of these, if not all of these, are highly recognizable to you. We don't assume all students drink or use. We know that many don't. I know that we have students coming to us directly out of recovery programs or having been sober for many years before they come to Cal Poly, or simply choosing not to use for a variety of different reasons. But we also recognize that many students will use, and so we want to give them the tools that they need to be safe. We talk about the size of drinks, how to measure that out in a red Solo cup, look at high risk or binge drinking and why it is defined the way it's defined, and then also start giving them the tools that they need to stay safer if they choose to drink. Things like eating before you drink, setting limits ahead of time, avoiding drinking games, things that will help them to better navigate the new social scene that they find themselves in. Sadly, we do have to talk about alcohol overdose. This is a very difficult video to watch. I want to warn you about that ahead of time if you haven't seen it, and also acknowledge that it can be difficult multiple times if you have seen it. I don't even know how many times I've lost count of how many times I've seen this video, and it is difficult every time, but it's important. So I'll encourage you to take care of yourself. Watch the video, pause if you need to take a pause, talk with somebody, process it, get some support, do whatever you need to take care of yourself.
It seemed like any other fraternity party, drinking event, everyone having a good time.
Carson was given a fifth of rum to share with the boy next to him. There was also a bottle or two of Everclear that was passed around.
I remember looking over at Carson and just had this kind of glaze in his eyes.
I noticed that he was becoming more intoxicated.
I could tell that he wasn't all there.
His body was kind of going limp, and
then I saw him sort of like, kind of like drooling out of his mouth, and then I knew he wasn't all right.
he wasn't even sick.
He had had so much to drink that it was past that. It wasn't that he just needed to get sick. He needed help. I saw two people just pick him up and carry him out of the room. Don't think I'll ever forget that.
I raised him for 18 years, and in 20 minutes, he was unresponsive.
I know that they thought about taking him to the hospital and changed their mind.
I think they were just afraid that if they went to the hospital, there would be some sort of legal action against them and possibly him, because he's obviously a minor, he's only 18.
They decided that they didn't want to get in trouble, and they decided that he would probably be fine.
And they brought him back inside and put him on a filthy, horrible, disgusting mattress on his side and put a trash can there and left him there.
At some point I asked, where did he go? The response was, he's inside on the couch. People are taking care of him. Don't worry. So I didn't worry.
Julia was coming down the staircase screaming and crying that we had had a missed call on our caller ID from the San Luis Obispo County Coroner's Office.
Called home, and my dad answered. He just said Carson is dead.
I just fell to the ground right up next to the side of a truck and just started crying.
It was devastating. When you hear that your best friend died, it doesn't seem real. Everything just shuts down. You're not yourself for months.
I had assumed that he had made it to the hospital, so I was in utter disbelief.
When I heard of how he died, it was unheard of. I just didn't think it was possible.
It made no sense to me that someone like Carson would pass away from alcohol poisoning.
It was weird to think that Carson could die from something as dumb as alcohol.
A lot of college students think they're invincible. We've seen people who puke and then wake up in the morning and they're fine. So we never think that, this is going to kill someone. It didn't have to be Carson thinking he was invincible, but other people thinking that he was. And I think it really comes down to that. The guys thought, A, we don't want to get in trouble, and B, oh, Carson's fine. He'll just sleep it off and wake up in the morning. And, they were wrong.
the people in the fraternity who made the decision not to take him to the hospital ultimately, just made a really bad, wrong decision that ended up killing him.
They decided that they'd rather save their own assets than try and help Carson in that situation.
Like, look at what happened now, You thought you weren't going to get in trouble, but now the fraternity doesn't even exist. And worst of all, Carson died.
These kids are living with the consequences now of what they didn't do that night.
They started telling the story, and I said, okay, we need to bring in the dean of students, we need to bring in the director of the department. They continued to tell the story, and I said, I'm taking you down to the police station.
If you're in a fraternity, especially if you're an officer of a fraternity, and you plan an event like the one that resulted in Carson's death, you can be charged with a felony, and it can change your life.
It cost me and my family over $160,000 in legal fees, over $500,000 in civil suit settlements. It's hard to get a job when your potential employer Googles your name and a mugshot is the first thing that comes up.
Whenever, any of my friends now, if they get into that position where they drank so much that they're having a hard time talking and standing or doing anything, I just monitor it more, and I think that would have been something someone should have just sat by him and watched him and not just left him there.
You gotta always have someone there just to watch them, whether they're fine or not. Because there's just like certain signs, like if their like skin or lips start to turn blue, or if their breathing pattern becomes irregular. That's something easy to notice if you're sitting with them, paying attention, which someone should have been with Carson that night.
Carson was someone that instinctively helped other people, and he died because other people didn't help him.
This event opened my eyes up completely to the issue of alcohol poisoning, and that it's a real thing. It's not just something you hear about. It actually happens to people, and you need to be extremely careful and look after your friends.
Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, and the dreams that you dream of once in a lullaby.
As I said, every time I see that video, I'm struck at the sadness and the loss that could have been prevented if people knew more. So we show them that video, and we go on to show them these slides to really tell the story of Carson Starkey, a Cal Poly freshman who died as a result of hazing and alcohol overdose with a .40 BAC at 18 years old. We go over the signs of alcohol overdose, including mental confusion, unresponsiveness, snoring, throwing up, hypothermia, erratic breathing, loss of consciousness, and paleness or blueness of skin. And we make it very clear that any one of those could be a sign that that person is in life danger. And then we talk about the medical amnesty policy and California's Lifeline law, the law that states that if someone calls 911 to aid someone who appears to be overdosing from either alcohol or another drug, neither one of them can be charged with possession of that or use of that substance. We want to make sure that students know that they can call for help when they see that it's needed and not be concerned that they're going to get him in trouble, her in trouble, them in trouble, and know that that person will get the help that they need. Resources. I'm going to talk in a little bit more detail with you all about the resources, because I know that during WOW, it is a litany of information, and they get so much input from what is available. And oftentimes, their health and well-being is not the first thing in their list of priorities. And so I want to make sure that while they get this information, that you know this information really well as well. So we go into campus health and well-being and what that means. We're broken up into counseling services, health services, well-being services, and SAFER. Counseling services has an emergency intake group that works with students who are in crisis, as well as individual, group, and couples counseling. Our health services department offers an array of services, including things like x-rays, a walk-in clinic, a pharmacy that includes over-the-counter medication as well as prescriptions. And much of that is available to students either free or at very low cost. And then we look at peer wellness programs. Peer wellness programs exist under Wellbeing Services and Health Education, and there are roughly 60 students who are trained in various topic areas to be able to educate their peers about healthy behaviors through one-on-one consultations, presentations, boothing, and other alternative events. Each one of these teams focuses their attention on making sure that students have what they need to be healthy. These include gender and power-based violence, or SAFER, mental wellness, sexual well-being, which includes STI and pregnancy prevention, alcohol, cannabis, and other drugs team, which I lovingly refer to as our Party Safe team, is a harm reduction team. They are not an abstinence team. So they work with students to ensure that they have that information that they need to stay safer if they choose to drink or use. We also have a fairly new but robust substance recovery team called Mustangs for Recovery. It's our collegiate recovery community, offering 4 recovery meetings a week, as well as social events for students who are either seeking recovery or in recovery, or who are allies to those students who are sober. And we will also be adding the Haven at College. In fall of 2020, the Haven at College will be able to offer intensive outpatient treatment options, and a residential experience for sober students. We end our WOW presentation with a cell phone activity. This was instituted in last year's WOW, and we will be morphing and using it again this year. It's a very incredibly powerful activity. Normally, our presentations take place in the pack, and so we have students turn on the flashlights on their phones and hold them face down while we make statements. And we ask them to raise up their flashlight if that statement is true for them. Being able to see that from the stage is incredibly powerful and normalizing. And we ask students to take a look around so they know that they're not alone. It's designed to normalize and open a dialogue around these topics and to help personalize the information that we've given them so that they can more accurately apply it to their lives. That's the end of our WOW presentation. Now I want to go on to talk to you all about how to help. Students coming in WOW, as you probably remember, are brand new to the college experience and are oftentimes overwhelmed and are in a huge transition period for their lives. You as leaders may see behaviors or see things that concern you, and you certainly have the support of your staff and your supervisors and additional support staff to help you navigate that. But these next few slides are designed for you to help you feel confident and a little bit more comfortable looking at some of the behaviors and how to interact and how to help. So warning signs. There are a multitude of warning signs, many of which are specific to the person. So you may see behavior changes. If somebody goes from being very, very social to being very, very quiet, or vice versa, it's really looking for those changes in behaviors that set off warning bells. When it comes to substance use, you might notice that it takes them more and more of the substance to get the same effects. You might notice that they are spending more and more time utilizing that substance at the cost of other things that they used to do. You may see that they're having negative consequences, getting multiple write-ups, having missing classes or problems with their GPA, and those negative consequences go unchecked. Again, changes in behavior are a huge warning sign. If you see changes in overall mood or rapidly changing moods, that also can be a warning sign. And then reduced interest in the things that used to be important for them. But overall, I say trust your gut. You will get to know these students. You will see what is normal behavior for them and what is abnormal behavior for them, and be able to tell when something is off. And trusting yourself simply means introducing that conversation. And if your gut is off, your gut is off. Now, we don't have these conversations for a lot of different reasons. People are concerned that they're going to be wrong or they're going to be right, and they don't know what to do if that person responds affirmatively. Students are afraid that it will harm their relationship or make that student feel differently about them. And I always ask this question: think about a difficult conversation you've had and what made it worth it. More often than not, what I hear from students when I give this presentation, it's what made it worth it was helping somebody who needed that extra help, or opening the door to someone, a friend of theirs, to let them know that they were there for them. And oftentimes they reflect that as a result of this difficult conversation, the relationship is deepened rather than risked. But how to have the conversation is a difficult one.
Awkward. Do I look familiar? I should. You might remember me from here. Here. Or maybe even here. You try to avoid me, then there I am again. But an awkward silence can be a great thing. Like Kelly here is about to demonstrate.
Hey, you haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
An awkward silence can actually be a perfect moment to reach out to a friend and ask if they're okay if they seem down. Starting the conversation now could stop something much worse from happening later on. Doesn't matter how you say it.
You all right?
Everything's okay?
All G?
Yo, what up?
You all right, girl?
Oh,
You cool?
bug and dog.
Just show you're there for them. Go on, Kelly. It's easy, awkward.
I'm always here for you. Okay? Okay.
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
While this video is designed to encourage people to ask one another about their mental health, the same concept applies if you're concerned about someone's substance use. There's a lot of fear around the awkward, around what might happen and what might be said or not said. But what you're really telling someone, if you check in with them about how they're doing, is that someone's paying attention, that you care enough about them to have an awkward conversation, to broach a difficult topic. They immediately are able to identify you as someone to turn to if they need help, and somebody who's their ally. And make sure you understand, asking won't put ideas in their head. What it will do is open the door for them to be honest, either then or down the road. How to start the conversation. That can be a tough one, and the easiest is, I'm worried about you because. Explain why you're concerned. Let them know what are the behaviors that you're seeing that are concerning you. Show compassion and empathy so they know that you are a safe person to talk to about this. Truly listen. Be as present as you can and simply just hearing them out. It's also important to know your limits. If you know that you already are very stressed out and have a lot on your plate and don't have the ability to really sit and listen and empathize with them, don't push yourself. Get support from elsewhere, get some help, but don't push past your limits. Know that it's okay if it doesn't go as planned. We'll talk about things to do if someone blows you off or if they don't want to have that conversation with you. It doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. It just can mean that they aren't ready to talk about it yet. And lastly, keep yourself safe. If somebody is agitated, or particularly if they are under the influence at the time, don't have that conversation. Wait till another time or seek out more support. So what to do if they do blow you off? We've all probably had the experience where you've asked a friend how they are and they say, I'm fine, and you know they're not fine. That's okay. It's their choice to talk to you about the circumstances when they're ready, but you have the ability to let them know that you're there to hear when they are ready. So you can offer to talk another time. You can follow up lightly. Hey, how's everything going with that circumstance that we were talking about? Or do you want to talk about that now? Don't take it personally. It may not be you at all that they don't want to talk to. It may be that they don't want to think about the circumstances at all. Try to connect them to resources. You know them, they have access, let them know that they're there. And you might even recommend that they talk to a professional. And then keep those communication lines open. Let them know that you're there when and if they are ever ready to talk. If you ever feel that there's a threat to harm to someone else or to themselves, please don't be afraid to call 911. That's what 911 is there for. Let them do that assessment. If there's any concern, err on the side of safety. Getting support. I highly recommend that you put these phone numbers into your phone or take a picture of this slide to have them available when you need them or if you need them. All of these supports are available for the student who is going through the struggle and also for you. If you have concerns or questions about how to broach the subject or whether or not you should be concerned, every single one of these resources is available for you to talk through and get a sense of where you can go next. Again, I touch on counseling services, health services, and well-being services as resources, again, for everyone. We do a lot of education and a lot of outreach and a lot of one-on-ones to help students navigate the difficult transition that can sometimes come with the first year of college. Lastly, I just want to thank you. What you do as leaders in NSTP helps shape the experience of the students coming in, helps shapes our community and what Cal Poly Proud looks like. Thank you for having courage, the courage to show up and let yourself be seen. And thank you for your time.